cherry and apricot clafoutis, which is a very simple French pastry. There's a little bit of prep work that has to be done that makes it even better, but honestly, you can make this with any seasonal fruit. We are going to use these beautiful cherries and these perfect little apricots. They're just so adorable. But this whole thing comes together really quickly. You can do it all by hand, but I'm going to expedite the process by using my blender. And there's just one little note. If you can make the batter 1 hour in advance or even the day before, it makes things a little bit better. But if you don't have the time or you didn't think ahead, you can absolutely make this all at the same time and it won't really affect the outcome. So let's get started. The first thing we have to do is prep our fruit. So again, you can do any flavor of clafoutis you want. Cherry is really common, but we're going to zhuzh things up a little bit and add some of these fresh apricots. Now, when I learned how to make this recipe in France, my teacher, who was Marguerite, she made me do it the old-fashioned way, which was not using a cherry pitter. I had to do it with another. So that's how I'm going to do it today. But if you happen to have a cherry pitter, you can use that. Or an even better tip, if you happen to have a metal straw, you can just poke it through the bottom and push it up through the top, and the straw will actually force the pit. I'm just going to use a knife today. And I appropriately chose a white shirt in which to pit cherries, but most of my clothes are white. And then for these little blushing apricots, we're just going to halve them and take the pip out. And then we're going to keep them halved. We're going to put them flesh side down in the pan before we bake them. And we're going to have that kind of rounded. Their little bums are going to be poking up through the clafoutis. So let's get to the cherries. And just pluck the stem off and then just run your knife around the cherry, separate it. And then you can either use the tip of your knife or your nail if you happen to have nails. And then you've got your 2 halves of cherry. So just continue this process on until you have all your cherries done. Now for my clafoutis, the recipe that I'm going to post for you is the bigger version, and it's meant to feed 6 to 8 people. I'm just making a baby version today, just for Warren and I to share tonight. So I have most of my cherries pitted. I just have one left here, and I thought I'd save it because it's a double. And while I am finishing prepping these cherries, clafoutis is a traditional dessert from the Limousin region of France. And essentially, kind of think of it like a French dessert pancake. What ends up happening is you end up with this sort of beautiful kind of custard, but a little bit thicker, almost like a custard and a pancake came together. And it's really delicious, served as a dessert. You can serve it warm, room temperature, cold, with some nice creme, like chantilly cream or a little bit of ice cream, particularly if you're serving it warm. All right, cherries are done. And now for the apricot, just run your knife around and then you get 2 little halves and then just pluck out this perfect little almond shaped pit. And then you've got your 2 little baby halves. And I'm just going to continue on with these other 3. Again, I'm just making a baby version. So I'm just going to use these 3 apricots. And when they are ripe, they perfectly come apart and that pip comes right out. Now for my vessel, I typically like to do clafoutis in some sort of a skillet or a cast iron pan. If you don't happen to have one, you can do this in a cake tin. But I'm just making a small version. So I just have a small Teflon pan here. But again, you can use cast iron. And I'm going to put a little bit of butter in the bottom. And I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of the sugar that's for the entire recipe in the bottom. And then for our apricots, we're going to place those flesh side down in the pan. Maybe one right in the center here. And don't worry about the butter. It doesn't need to be melted ahead of time. It's just going to melt in the oven. And then with our cherries, just sprinkle those around the apricots. Comes that. And there's your pan prepared. So that's stage 1 done. And that's the most amount of work you're going to have to do for this recipe. The next stage, we're going to bring in our blender and it's going to do the rest of the work. Yes. shift things down a little bit. And all of these ingredients, with the exception of the fruit, of course, you're likely going to have in your pantry. So there's no stress about having to go out and buy a lot of fancy ingredients to make this particular French pastry. So into the blender, we're going to do 2 eggs right in. I always like to crack my eggs either off of each other or on a flat surface. And then we've got some whole milk. Oops, right in. Little cleanup. And the rest of our white sugar, which is not too much, even for the whole recipe, it's not that much sugar. We really want the sugars in the fruit to shine through. I'm going to put just a tiny touch of almond extract in here. You could use amaretto if you wanted to. Don't use too much though. Almond extract can be really overpowering. We just want a whisper of it. And a little pinch of salt, my little antique salt cellar. And then finally, just some regular all-purpose flour. I'm just gonna plonk that in there, make sure it's all in. And then pardon the noise for one moment, but we're just gonna put this on high and make sure it gets fully blended and nice and silky smooth. Done. So it's beautifully smooth. However, it's produced a lot of bubbles, and this is why resting it is ideal. So if you happen to have the time, half an hour or an hour in the fridge will calm those bubbles down, and then it'll make the custard nicer during the baking process. So I'm going to put this in the fridge, and I'm going to see you in about half an hour. All right, now that your batter has mellowed out a little bit, we have preheated the oven to 375 degrees, and I've got my pan ready. Again, we've got a little bit of sugar, a little bit of unsalted butter. Not sure if I said that earlier. And then our beautiful fruit is ready to receive our nice, smooth, silky batter. So just pour this right over the top. And this is going to go directly into our hot oven. Beautiful. And this is going to take probably somewhere between, for this smaller size, probably about 28 minutes or so. Just enough time for me to have a little tea and read a little book. Off to the oven. Clafoutis is in the oven. Timer is on. And I changed my mind on the coffee. I happen to have a little bit of Sauterne that was in the fridge that a friend left for me. So we're going to go with Sauterne. Because who says no to Sauterne, especially on a hot, humid day, which it is. I don't know if you can tell from my hair, but it's big. So Sauterne, and I am going to read the book though, or I'm going to flip through it. And the one I chose from the library, my cookbook library today, is A Table, making a French dessert. So why not take a peek at a French cookbook? This one is Rebecca Pepler, and I got this a little while ago and I haven't actually cracked it open yet. But it looks like a real beauty. So let's look at this platter, this aioli platter. So I'm going to have a flip through this. I'm going to enjoy my ice cold Sauterne. My timer's going to ding, and we'll be back to see the final result. It's ready. Look at that. Bubbly, gorgeous Clafoutis. So you can see the little bums of the apricots and our beautiful cherries, but just a little bit of browning. It is perfect. So I'm just going to let this cool just for a moment. And I mean, this is way too big for 2 people. This is really for 4 people. The recipe that I'm going to post for you, again, is for kind of 6 to 8 people. You can, of course, do this in a smaller pan, or as I've done in previous times, I make them in the little baby mini cast iron pans, and then everyone gets their own little individual clafoutis, and it looks really pretty. But this will make last over a few days. You can have this for dessert, but a little trick, or not really a trick, but more like something you should try, is have it for breakfast. Just a little piece, nice cappuccino, and you can kind of do the very kind of French Italian thing of having a little sweet for breakfast. Instead of having eggs, toast, just something to try. Once this is cool, we're going to give it just a very simple dusting of confectioner sugar. But as I mentioned, if you want to serve it more luxe and for dessert, a little fresh cream, whipped with even a touch of vanilla. Or you could flavor it with a little bit of Grand Marnier, because the orange flavor will go really beautifully with the apricots and cherries. Or you can just do a little bit of vanilla bean ice cream, which would be really nice too. A little dusting of beautiful powdered sugar. Not too much. We don't want to add too much sweetness, but it just looks beautiful. A little bit of dusting. And I've still got some of my cold sauterne here, which goes really well with it. And then just dive in. I want to get a little apricot for myself. It really is the perfect texture. You get the beautiful, slightly soft flavor of the fresh apricots, and then the cherries are just a little bit tart, a little bit sweet, and then that pancake custard combo, it's like silky and smooth and just yields perfectly under the tooth. And then you get a little bit of crispiness from the top where it got a little bit brown. It's just so lovely. Your guests will love it regardless of what fruit you use. I will post this recipe on my website at enidgrace.com under the recipe tab. And I will also be including this recipe as well as a couple other really simple French pastry recipes for summer in my next newsletter, which is also going to come out this week, probably on July 2nd. And you can find my newsletter on Substack, and it's called Shaking Out the Tablecloth. I really hope you give this a try. And if you do, send me a note, send me some photos. I'd love to know how it went and what other types of fruit you used. Enjoy.